Well, hello everybody and good afternoon. I'm delighted to introduce you to our consumers. Interesting word, consumers, about students, but they are, I suppose, the consumers. They're the people doing everything that we're talking about. My name is Sacha Van Stratton. I'm the Director of eLearning here at Berkhamsted. And what we're going to do over the next 20 minutes or so is take you on a whistle-stop tour, showing you how our students are using e-learning in the broadest sense of the term. I was quite pleased when Nick Dennis this morning said, what is e-learning? Because here it means lots of different things to us, but the emphasis is on the learning, which is why I make a point that the E in my job title is small and the L is big, because that's what I think the focus should be. I'm going to start with an amazing animation to give you a sort of little film for 2 minutes that was made by Alison, who's sitting nearest to me, and she did that last year as part of some Year 12 assignment that she was set, and I think it's a really good example of how digital media and digital literacy can be used to great effect in terms of learning.
Voici l'histoire de Roméo et Juliette. Un film par Colin Serrault de 1989. Mais si vous pensiez que ce serait l'histoire par Monsieur William Shakespeare, vous seriez incorrect. Ça, c'est trop ennuyeuse et trop sentimental. Au lieu de cela, voici une autre histoire qui s'agit de la richesse et de la pauvreté. C'est un film intéressant avec le concept de l'amour et de la trahison en même temps. Les caractères principaux sont joués par Daniel Auteuil et Fermine Richard. Je suis PDG d'une entreprise de yachts qui s'appelle Blondet. Je suis antillaise, je suis femme de ménage, j'ai 5 enfants de 5 pères différents. Cependant, il y a une louche affaire qui se passe dans l'entreprise. 2 hommes, un de ceux qui travaille en collaboration avec la réceptionniste, empoisonne le yacht pour détruire M. Blondet et prendre en charge de l'entreprise. Juliette, la seule personne qui sait de cette affaire, parle avec M. Blondet et elle lui dit aussi que sa femme a une liaison avec son collègue. Ah, zut! Qu'est-ce qu'il va faire? Est-ce que Juliette est son dernier espoir? Ou a-t-elle ses propres problèmes qui sont plus importants? Dans un film rempli de l'humeur, mais implique des sujets sérieux comme la race et le statut social, il réunit 2 personnes très différentes. C'est une histoire incroyable qu'on ne peut pas oublier.
It's not bad, is it? It was actually a year ago, it was the beginning of the year, that Laura, the head of languages, sent me an email with a link, and she said, if you'll teach media studies, have a look at this. And I did. It was one of those sort of jaw-dropping moments when you think, wow, you know, the kids are all right, they're pretty good. But Alison, let me ask you, how did you even get the idea for this animation? Because I don't think you were asked to go make an animation, you just went off left field and did your own thing.
No, I think it was kind of like something that I wanted to do because it was a challenge and kind of a self-taught thing. So I kind of went off and thought, well, I'm not going to do, you know, the essay thing. Because obviously this animation can't be graded as in the way that an essay can, like in an exam. So I kind of thought, well, it's a bit different, it's a bit more kind of, a bit more variety. And I just wanted to kind of draw the characters and create it and it'd be really fun and show my classmates.
And what did you use to create it? Because the story behind what you used, I think, will be of some interest to the people who are here today.
It is an open source software program called Pencil, which is available for Windows, Linux and Mac. And I use an Apple Mac computer and I use a graphics tablet and a stylus pen to do the drawings. And it's really simple to use. I think that members of staff who probably may not understand how to do something like this for like a PowerPoint or something for a class, it was really easy for me to use. And I like completely adjusting to the tools like quite quickly. You have the colour palette, very simple kind of technique. And there is this thing on it which isn't as simple as a program that I used previously called Colorit, which is for Apple. And it was very kind of basic, kind of flipbook animation. But on this pencil software, they have this thing called onion skinning, which I'm sure you've probably heard of, saving you having to redraw each frame. And you have the tracing of the previous frame, which kind of saves time. And I think it just makes everything a bit more fluent.
Well, what interests me is that everything you're talking about, no teacher at school was involved in teaching you. How did you know?
Well, I think I am quite interested in art already, and I've done GCSE art and I'm doing A-level art. And I've always liked drawing, and initially I started off kind of, obviously, pen and paper and pencil and paper, but kind of moving that to digitally drawing, and then thinking about how to make the drawings move, and doing like a walk cycle or like a bouncing ball, and very simple kind of things to start off with, and kind of set yourself tasks. And I also learned from tutorials and other people's videos on YouTube, which is very useful.
So actually, there was something we were hearing about earlier. Are you using YouTube then as a learning resource and picking up comments and leaving people comments and using it as a way to teach things or learn things that are important to you that you can't get in school?
I think I am using the YouTube tutorials because you get other people's kind of their way of doing it, and they know things that you don't know yet how to do. So I'd see a tutorial on YouTube on like an arm moving, like hand waving, and someone's done it differently, and then you think, oh, I didn't know I could do that, and then I would take that and then try and put it in my own way and make it kind of unique. And things like lip syncing, which I've obviously had on this, and speaking in French, writing a script for that, and then trying to think about the mouth shapes and things like that. So.
And can I ask one final question? Does it matter that teachers don't know how to use this, or is it more important that teachers give you the space to use what you know, if that's what you want to do as part of your learning experience?
I think that all teachers would be able to use this program. I think it's very easy to use. But if they didn't know how to use it, and if some people are kind of partial to the PowerPoint presentation or setting the essay, like this was a French film that we watched, and it was a review homework, and I thought, obviously everyone else is going to do the essay or the PowerPoint kind of review thing, or like a film review. So taking it into kind of an animation, I think that teachers, I think they would be able to use the tools, use the software. But if they didn't know how to use it, then I think it's really good to encourage that, even though you don't know how to use it. If you encourage a kind of a brand new thing, you bring more variety into the classroom, and seeing my animation, I don't know, it just kind of influencing people to seeing something differently as opposed to an essay or a PowerPoint.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Alison. And let's move on to Lucy and talk about Google Docs and Google Sites. A year ago, we were going to using Google Apps for Education. So every student from year 7 and above gets a branded Gmail address, so it's their normal network username at berkhamstedschool.net. They get access to Google Docs for collaborative work in Google Sites, where students and teachers can make their own websites, Google Calendars, and it's been a really sort of big success. In the next picture, I'll be showing you some of the stats and figures about that. But Lucy, you're very much involved in an online literary magazine called The Inkspot. Can you explain to me how you've got involved with Inkspot and what it does and how it works?
Well, I first got into it because it's one of the co-curricular clubs, but we do things other than on the website, but the majority of the stuff we do then load onto the website afterwards. So it's really useful, and it can help you a lot with your learning as well, because you can look at what other people's done and learn from that as well.
So in actual fact, it's bringing you into contact not just with students in your own year, but students across all the different year groups.
Yeah, it's really easy, because especially with the Gmail, like the emailing, as long as you know someone's first name and last name, you can email them via that thing, the Gmail. So if say on Inkspot you were doing play or something that you wanted to load onto the website, you could ask someone to bring in something via Gmail and they'd get it straight away.
And is it an advantage that everything's online, that we're publishing this as a Google site, rather than, say, printing it and handing it out?
Well, yeah, it does save a lot of paper, but also anyone can, because with the library you can just go onto a computer, so it's really easy just to go onto the computer, just find it straight away, and be able to look at it. So it makes it really easy.
And finally, if I move on to Max and his experience of using it in the sixth form, can I ask you sort of how you're finding the learning platform, which is basically Google Apps? How is that making life better for you in terms of learning and what you get up to in your academic subjects?
Well, for instance, in geography, we got an email with a worksheet on it, and we had to complete the worksheet, which makes it a whole lot easier than having to print off pieces of paper and give it to people, and then having to print stuff off and stick them on and arranging it. And it's so much easier because it's really easy to email it, and it's really easy to do.
Fantastic. Max, let me move on to you and some of the work you've been doing where, with Rosie McCall, the Deputy Head of English, who will also be speaking in that section, about very much collaborative learning. And that's the move from GCSE to A-level and using collaborative Google Docs where you have up to 50 people at the same time working together. Give us a flavour of how you've done that in English A-level and what benefit that's brought.
I think the transaction between GCSE and AS is so vast and is actually quite hard. You sort of need that collaborative learning within your class. Usually in GCSE it's very independent. However, in A-level, it's a very collaborative working. So stuff like Google Docs. I mean, as you can see here, a task here we were given a chapter between 5 of us, and as a group we were made to do summaries and quotations and analysation of that chapter. And then what we did in the class was open up to the floor of the other pupils in our class, and it was sort of like an open discussion using Google Docs, and something that we hadn't had between year 7 and year 11 was a sort of like collaborative, sort of like different interpretations of the English.
So it's very much sort of 20 heads are better than one?
Yes. Yeah.
And has it made a difference? Do you feel you... I know it's a tricky question, but do you know more because of this?
Yeah. I feel you are able to give a broader analysation of the text that you're studying due to the different interpretations that you're able to grasp from the use of the Google Docs. Yeah.
And I know one of the stories that Ms. McCall likes to sort of tell is that I think it was your group, I think was it 5 of you produced a 5,000 word document in an afternoon. Yeah, she's being modest, but they did. And I know, it's one of those things that actually, that idea of sort of crowdsourcing, of letting the students genuinely take ownership of what they do, can sort of reap quite substantial rewards. Max, thank you. Let's move on to Felix. Because Felix and I work on media studies A-level. And media studies, certainly with OCR, is interesting because the traditional coursework essay has been replaced with a blog, which gives me the interesting headache of how do I mark an online blog, which is multimedia by necessity. It's in the spec, it says students can't just take an essay and dump it in a blog, it's got to have audio and video and all sorts of multimedia content. And the way I got around it this year was I used DIGO, D-I-I-G-O, which some of you may have come across, and the beauty with DIGO is that I can work collaboratively with students by marking on the screen. So this is Felix's blog from last year, and you see I can leave little sort of yellow sticky notes, I can highlight spelling corrections, I can use a different colour to say this isn't a spelling correction, but I'm making a kind of point of interest. And then Felix in turn can sort of comment and sort of have a conversation with me, as it were, about this learning object. So Felix, let me start by asking you, how have you found the whole experience of using the blog as a kind of academic learning tool?
I think that in the media, it's always, well, we're dealing with very visual items anyway, because they're trying to sell a story or an argument to us. So when you're using a blog, the idea is to have that visual aspect in your blog, with your subject. So I personally am a visual learner. I think that's the best way of work, and in short bursts of information. Whereas if you're writing an essay, it's quite a lot to take in. It's quite overwhelming sometimes just looking at all that text. Whereas if you're using a blog, you can have short bursts of information and then give an example. So for example, in media we're taught to use PEE, which is point, example, explain. So if I was to make a point about a music video or a genre of music videos, which I have been recently, I can make that point, then go into a source such as YouTube, get that source, just put it in quickly, embed the file, instead of writing it in a pen and paper and then putting a link down. It's just so much easier, and you can see exactly what I'm trying to say, and then underneath I'll write how it links to what I'm trying to put forward.
And does it make a difference that people, not just me, with a mum, but other people read the blog and comment on it?
Yeah, I think everyone can learn a lot from each other. So, for example, like Twitter, we can follow each other. So I can see what the other students are doing with their blogs, and I can maybe use some of their ideas, and they can use some of my ideas, and the layout, and eventually you can slowly perfect what you're doing, which is very helpful, because if you're just working on your own, there's no sources that you can just take ideas from, which sounds like stealing, but it's actually really helpful when you're just working together in that sort of environment.
That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much. And lastly, we move on to Xavier and Nick, who are part of Laura Doggett's sort of great experiment with iPads that was launched a couple of weeks ago, and she'll be talking in far more detail about that also in the next session. But let's look at a student perspective for you. So guys, can I say, you've had them for a couple of weeks. What are your first impressions of the iPad? Is it a learning tool, or is it a shiny tool?
Well, I mean, our first impressions were quite mixed, because I think some of the people found it quite difficult operating with them. That was only the first lesson though. We had to sort of get used to them. We had to use patience, but I think it's beginning to improve, because we now know how to operate with them. We've used them for a few lessons now, and there are no real concerns. So, I mean, first impressions were quite good. I mean, the class was pretty amazed about the iPads.
Nick, can I ask you, we were having this discussion just before we came in, and I said to Nick, what do you think? Should we give every student an iPad and do away with handwriting, or not? What are your views? And you had quite an interesting take on it. Would you mind sharing it with the audience, please?
I believe that handwriting has been around for so long. I thought it's a really key sort of formal way of expressing yourself, and I found that the iPad is great because it adds a bit of variety to the usual handwriting, and I thought that when you combine them with an equilibrium of handwriting and iPad, you get a far better, I thought, education from them. I thought with our teacher when we were doing French, sometimes with the iPads, I thought it was a lot of fun, but sometimes I enjoyed my handwriting as well, just the pleasure of being able to write. So no, I didn't think it was good to completely push aside the handwriting aspect of work.
And do you think, I mean, could you see, because it's something we're talking about at the moment, a situation where rather than a teacher booking you in an IT room, you would have a tablet device of some sort, so that if you want to use Google Doc, you can. If you want to do some research online, you can. Or indeed, what's interesting also, you mentioned you use the Khan Academy.
I do.
Can you just talk about that as well, how you use the Khan Academy and the sort of benefits that might be able to bring into your daily classroom lessons?
I use a program on the internet called Khan Academy, which is a sort of academic website by a man who posts a lot of videos with he sort of uses the videos and writes information as speaking. And me being a auditory and a photographic learner, it helps me a lot. I managed to boost my grades in English from D to B, from biology B to A star. So it's really helped me. It has these amazing videos on anything really. I mean, from beginning of GCSE all the way to your AS. It's got stuff which I didn't know about, which is really interesting and pulls you in more into your subject. So I thought if it's put on the iPad, that would be a real bonus to learning for students like me.
And do you see, I mean, for both of you, from your limited experience the last fortnight, could you see a tablet device replacing textbooks, actually replacing the exercise book at some point during your time at school?
Perhaps. I mean, the great thing about them is they're so light and portable. And I mean, on some days I have to carry around 2 bags with me for my books, and obviously you can have all the information on just one tablet. Obviously the problem is, I don't think you can solely rely on the tablets, because obviously they are electronic and they can maybe crash, and if you're using them, just them and not textbooks, I mean, they're not completely reliable.
Okay. Well, on that sort of word of wisdom, I'm aware that the clock is telling me it's 20 past. Are there any questions anyone would like to ask quickly before coffee? Shortly, yeah.
Well, I'd like to play devil's advocate, because that's got it. What do people have difficulty? Is it not true? I mean, tablets may be reliable, but you might leave your book at home, or you might leave your book in the rain. Does it not make their books more usual if they're left in the quad in the rain?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think obviously tablets, you can have all your subjects maybe on just one tablet. I mean, I don't know if we're thinking about that. But obviously it saves paper as well, and I think that in our class everyone sort of understood the value. I mean, they cost quite a lot, but everyone sort of understood that they're not toys, they're something that we should treat with respect, and yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, over there.
How often do you have to recharge the iPads, and do they ever run out of power to fund, unfortunately?
Not with us, yes, they haven't yet. They're always recharging.
I was going to say, I charge them overnight and they easily last a day with heavy use.
And the gentleman's got a question as well.
Yes, if I could ask the sixth form student who did the animation that we saw, in terms of the amount of time you spent doing that, how would that compare to how much time you would spend on a normal piece of written homework?
The animation took a lot longer, obviously. It took me a half term, I think, because obviously drawing things and thinking up the script, putting all the editing together with the video and the audio and stuff. So yeah, it did take a lot more work than an essay that I've done. So yeah.
I mean, I suppose the issue is, it's a fair point. Would we ask everybody to do that and spend half a term? No, we wouldn't. And I suppose the beauty of using Google Apps is it's very fast. And it was an easy sell when I launched it a year ago, because I said to the staff, if you can use Office, you can use this, and to the students I said it's Facebook for school, which weirdly it's quite popular. But I think it's that idea of actually having an openness, and as Steve was saying, his talk tried to kind of get a transformational change in terms of how we as teachers think about what is acceptable academic submission, and I suppose that's really where we're at, rather than looking at, we want everybody to animate, we want everybody to do this or that. We're trying to put in an infrastructure, academically as well as technically, that allows innovation to flourish. So there was another, yes there.
I was just going to say, although it took you half a term to do, it wasn't just a protest, it was cross-curricular, there was lots more involved. You know, talk about their art skills and graphic skills and everything. It's quite different, you can't compare that to it. It's much wider and it's learning, we're talking about learning.
Yes, so I did say it's a half-term holiday, not a whole half-term.
Yeah, like a half-term holiday.
Yeah, it was a great. It was learning as a treat, which is obviously doing something right if the students want to do that. I'll take one more question. The gentleman's hand up first.
So I was just going to ask, how often do you print something out? Do you ever print out work?
Well, we've taken pretty much all the printers away, so that's quite a tricky endeavour in itself. So the answer is not sort of. I mean, it's worth saying, just briefly, I'll let the students answer how often they print. We put the learning platform in place first, September of last year, and in February of this year, we took all the printers away. And we replaced them with 45 multifunctional devices located at a corner spot conveniently close to your classroom. And the students get an allowance each year, and then after that they've got to pay to sort of top it up. And the idea of that was very much that simply producing reams of paper that you put in a folder, for teachers to create lots of handouts may make them feel better, thinking, look, oh, there's a great folder, and the students have got this great folder. Does it make learning better? We are dubious about that. So there's a pedagogical approach to it, and there's a purely practical, financial one, that we were burning millions of pages, literally millions of pages of paper every year, and it's not environmentally friendly, it's not cost effective. and we don't think it actually makes the end outcomes better necessarily. But let me ask the students then, how often do you all print out? I'm sure.
Is this in all subjects or?
Yeah, I mean, you know, in all subjects, is there are there some subjects you print more rather than less?
I have quite a large output of photography, perhaps too much.
Yeah. Well, I suppose, be more selective in your program. Lucy, what about you?
Well,
in year 8?
most of our homework we do at home, so we normally print them at home, but then sometimes we do things at break, lunch, and I don't know that many people that print loads out. We just really print as much as we need to print our homework off and stuff like that, but we don't use huge amounts.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm aware we're kind of eating into coffee and chat time. If I ask the students to hang around at the front, if you've got more questions for them, please feel free to come up and chat. Otherwise, thank you all for your time, and I'll be back in the next session. Thank you.